everyone, and welcome to Service for the Community. I'm your host, Matt Blow, and today we're talking about a very special episode for the Rotary where they're going to kind of talk to us about how one specific way they help with disaster relief. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing fine, Matt. Thanks for having me here today.
No problem.
And what we'd like to address today is what happens in the case of a disaster, whether it's man-made or a natural disaster. As we sit here in Clarkston, is there any way we can help some of these big disasters that we've heard about around the world? And Rotary has developed a program specifically from one man, but he's developed a program to provide shelter in the case of a natural disaster. That the world is pretty good at getting food and medicine to a disaster, but shelter's always been the big bugaboo. If we think about a landslide in Nepal, it's going to be below freezing tonight up there in those high mountains. So what is where's your 3-year-old going to sleep tonight?
Right.
Or if we think about even the tropics, well, it's going to be 80 degrees tonight. What's the big deal? Except the malaria mosquito comes out to feed right after midnight. So if you're laying on that nice sandy beach, it's 80 degrees, you're the big smorgasbord for the malaria mosquitoes. So shelter is always something that needs to be there and has been a real problem. But this Shelter Box program has addressed that.
Yeah. Well, so simply, what is Shelter Box?
Okay, yeah. Shelter Box, the big green box, contains all those items that are necessary for shelter. So the basic one is a big green tent, or a big tent. It's not green, the box is tent. And maybe we could put up a display of the different types of tents. Yeah. So you can see there the one that's labeled Standard Relief Tent is the one that we send to most places. It's a high-strength tent. It's been tested up to, since this is all British, 100 kilometers an hour, or about 60-mile-an-hour winds. It's designed to handle up to 10 people. It's a real sturdy tent. The next one over there on the right is a little tent more designed for warm weather situations. It's lighter, and one of the big problems in all this is shipping, and so the lightness really means something.
Sure.
The flex tent that's up there is actually 1/4 of that tent is fireproof.
Oh, wow.
So most tents are fire resistant, but this one is fireproof. And that's what allows us to actually put a heater in there or a stove inside. You can see the stove.
Is that the primary concern with heat resistant and fireproof? Is that that putting heaters in there, or are there other concerns for making it resistant?
The primary thing, if you're going to put a heat source in there, you want it fireproof.
Okay.
As opposed to fire resistance, basically means you can, if a fire starts and you can get it out real fast, it won't.
You're fine.
Yeah, it won't grow through the whole tent.
Gotcha.
And then the last tent that was up there, that UN spec tent, this was kind of a sad one. As you see on all the other tents, you'll see Shelter Box, you'll see Rotary labels, you'll see lots of insignias. But that UN tent has nothing on it. And the reason for that is it's going to conflict areas, so like Syria. So you don't want anything on there that will distinguish that tent from any other tent, so it never becomes a target for some terrorist.
Interesting.
Yeah, if you put a nice flag of some country up there and it's somebody else who doesn't like that country, it's a target, not an insignia. So that's the tent, and that's one of the key ingredients of the whole thing. But there's also the stuff that goes in the box.
Yeah, I was going to say, what does the average tent contain?
So after, think about the disaster and everything's been wiped out. There is nothing left. So if we do get the tent and food comes in, so now you've got a 20-pound bag of flour or some rice or some beans, how are you going to cook it? All your cooked stuff just washed down in the flood or whatever.
Right.
So all the packages will contain something to cook on, so a stove of some sort.
Okay.
And we have two different types. We have one that burns fluid, and that would be the preferred one to send because it's lighter. But not every place has that, so we also have a wood burning stove, and it's extremely efficient. One of the problems in refugee areas is anything that can be burned quickly gets scavenged, and you're left with a totally denuded area around it. All the trees are ripped down, anything is big enough to burn.
Okay.
So this one is much more efficient than the campfire. And then you need something to cook with, pots, pans, something to eat off, some eating utensils. And then another big problem in all these areas is water. So we send along a water filtration unit.
Okay.
You can pour dirty water in it and get drinkable water out of it. We've even tested that ourselves. And then sleeping bags or mats, waterproof mats. We kind of tailor that if it's going to a colder area, there'll be warmer sleeping bags. If it's going to a warmer area, then maybe just blankets is all we need to send. And then, so water filtration. And then one of the other things that's interesting, and I think we've got a picture of a young boy with a little lamp. Yeah. If you think about City of Clarkson, just lost all of its electricity, and there's just no light in the area. This is the only source of light. So it's a solar-powered light.
So that device on the front that's the solar panel then?
That's the solar panel,
Okay.
correct? Yep, and it'll light up. And one of the things about Shelter Box is it really works on dignity. And you think about your little 3-year-old kid, that night light.
Yeah.
Well, this is his night light, and it's the night light for the whole city. So he can use it to carry or walk at night, or maybe you hang it up in front of your tent and he knows that's my tent on the way home. Another thing it gets used for is if you've got to go to the bathroom at night and you're headed for the latrine. Many warmer places, snakes like to show up at that latrine, so you might want
So you want to
to.
be paying attention to that.
Yep, and some light would help you.
Sure.
So
Now,
I get. Go ahead.
it's in kind of like a balloon kind of container. Is there a reason to use that over maybe certain types of flashlights or anything like that?
The big reason is weight. That thing weighs 3 ounces. Every flashlight I know is a lot more than 3 ounces.
Could be a little heavier, sure.
And then and it's an LED light.
Okay.
So one of the problems with LEDs is very bright. So that's why the container to diffuse the light.
Okay.
And then it has 3 different settings. It has a very low light that'll preserve the energy overnight, and a higher intensity light. We've even heard of people being able to read from it.
Oh, wow.
So kids can go back to school and study at night. And then finally there's a flashing
Okay.
part to it. And one of the interesting parts of that, the couple gals designed this, and they took it to Shark Tank,
Oh, wow.
and a couple of those billionaires bought into the program.
Oh.
And from our point of view of a Shelter Box, one of the real nice things that happened is they went to see the lamps in practice over in one of the disasters in Africa. And they were so impressed with the whole organization that I understand they wrote us a pretty good sized check. So that was a side benefit of
Sure,
that.
sure. So, what's kind of the history of Shelter Box? Like, how long has it been around? How various forms?
Yeah, Shelter Box got started in the late 90s when a Rotarian in Cornwall, England was watching a TV show, news one night, and there had been a disaster and everybody had lost everything, and he watched as the food, loaves of bread, were being thrown out of the back end of a pickup truck.
Okay.
He said, not only these people lost everything, now they've lost their dignity. They got to go dig around in the sand and gravel and fight for a loaf of bread. So he said, okay, if my family lost everything, what would I have to have? And that's when he went through and came up with this list of things to put in that tent, or in the box.
Sure.
And real scientific on how the box showed up. He went to the hardware store and said, I need this and this and this, and I need something to put in it. What's the biggest box you have?
Right.
The big green box was no more science behind it than that. So he showed up with that. So then he took that to his Rotary Club and said, we need a millennial project. This was 1999. And he described what he wanted to do, and the club bought into the idea, and they kind of developed it, sourced the material. The stove comes from Sweden, the tents come from China, and so they sourced all the material, put it together, and we're ready to go. And then there was a big landslide in India. And so they sent their first 143 boxes in 2001 to India. And it worked real well. They got real good feedback. The local Rotary Club said this is great. And so they decided to keep on doing it. They got a number of other clubs interested, a number of other organizations, and some corporations started writing some big checks. So over the course of the next 4 years, they were able to dispense about 2,600 boxes.
Oh, wow.
So 650 a year, something like that. So in 2004, they decided, let's get ambitious, we'll send out 900 boxes. Well, if you remember, Christmas of 2004 was when the huge Indian tsunami hit.
Okay.
250,000 people lost their lives. It was all over every country in the Indian Ocean. And instead of sending out 900 boxes, they wound up sending out more than 11,000 boxes.
Wow.
So that vaulted them up to, now they're a significant player in
Sure.
the disaster relief business.
Sure.
One of the things about disaster relief is every country, it's the UN that headquarters it, because in every country there is a UN office.
Sure.
Which was one of the big problems in Haiti, because they were in their office when it hit and they were all killed. But now we are amongst the groups that get asked to come in or for it. So there's a group that does nothing but sanitation. There's a group that does things involving water. You think about setting up 500 tents, we're talking almost 5,000 people. Wow. There's security issues, you got to build roads, you got to get power in. So all those organizations come together, and now ShelterBox is part of one of those organizations.
So so the first year was, you said 160?
143.
143. And so like what, so 143 to, what's the pinnacle?
The pinnacle was probably Haiti.
Okay.
We issued over 28,000 boxes went to Haiti. So over 250,000 people are living in tents from that. And that's the first disaster, the first earthquake in Haiti. Second one, we sent far fewer. But the goal each year now is to try and get to 50,000 boxes. There's more in demand for that. We could sell or disperse lots more than that. But that's the goal, is 50, and at $1,000 a box, we're talking $50 million that need to be raised. Yeah. So that would be what we'd like to be doing. Right now we're running in the 30,000 range.
Okay.
But we're headed up there.
Well, and I believe we have a video that kind of talks about ShelterBox.
It'll probably explain it much better than I've explained. And certainly the pictures are much better than looking at me. So
let's take a look at that video.
Imagine a situation where you've lost everything, whether through earthquake or flood, tsunami or cyclone, volcano or conflict. What would you and your family need to survive? Imagine a situation where you've lost everything. Then a green box arrives, a shelter box.
It started out as a very simple concept. What would you need for your family if you lost everything in a disaster? A strong, tried and tested tent for shelter. Some thermal blankets, ground sheets, hats and gloves for warmth. Mosquito nets and a water filter to protect your family from disease. Pots and pans to cook with, a toolkit to repair your home to earn your living. Basically life-saving, life-changing, very essential equipment.
ShelterBox was founded in the year 2000 and came of age after the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004.
We were able to get hold of an Antonov 124, which is the largest aircraft in the world. We sent 10 Arctic lorry loads up, enough aid for 2,000 families. A massive effort that catapulted us onto the world stage of humanitarian aid.
Since then, over 100,000 shelter boxes have been sent to disaster victims on every continent around the world. Shelter boxes are delivered in the most effective ways possible. They're packed by teams of volunteers at ShelterBox HQ in Cornwall, England. They then travel by truck and aeroplane to the affected areas. And that's when the work really starts. Highly trained volunteers from the Shelter Box response team deliver boxes to the most vulnerable and work with communities to train them in using the equipment. Shelter boxes are delivered by boat or helicopter, tuk-tuk or donkey, whatever it takes. When a devastating earthquake hit Haiti in January 2010, Shelter Box mobilised and was sending boxes within hours.
It really is unimaginable at this point, the totality of destruction throughout the city. Every open area is filled with people sleeping in the streets. Everyone's functioning without electricity, without water, makeshift shelters everywhere. It's unimaginable. Just the loss of life alone is massive. The coordination effort here is huge. It's not just we have shelter, it's where can we put that? Do we have enough for that entire camp? Can we provide security? Can others provide food, water, sanitation for those areas? So it's just a massive coordination effort, the number of different agencies that are here on the ground.
I told these people how to put up tents, and now we're putting up a tent one after another. Behind us, you can see the tents they used to live in. So this is an example of people working with us and camp building up.
Shelter Box sent nearly 30,000 boxes in total, helping almost 1/3 people. In Pakistan, nearly a month of rain caused floods that killed thousands and left millions homeless. Shelter Box responded by distributing enough shelter for 150,000 people.
It's a collective will of a huge number of people, from our volunteers, other agencies, our own response team volunteers, global affiliates and our staff. A lot of skill and endeavour goes into it. Every box we deliver brings hope and dignity to people in their greatest hour of need. There will always be families in need. Fortunately, there will also be those who want to help. Whatever your contribution, you can make a difference to families made homeless by disaster.
Shelter Box relies on volunteers and donations to make its work possible. Your gift of time or money can help save lives and give new hope to families who have lost everything. Bringing shelter, warmth and dignity in the shape of a green box.
Interesting. So now, where are all the places that Shelter Box is currently deployed?
We've often hear about the big ones. So we know about Haiti, we know about Japan and some of those places, but a disaster occurs about every 2 weeks around the world. And so right now, we're in Peru and in Colombia, and I suspect we'll be in Ecuador before too long. We've got floods down there that are occurring. They're getting as much rain in a night, this is the rainy season, they'll get as much rain in one night as they usually get in a month. So it results in floods and landslides. We are in Cameroon, and there it's a conflict, war conflict, where refugees are coming over from neighboring countries and seeking refuge there. We're also in Niger for the same reason, Boko Haram, that area. If you take the New York Times, about 3-4 weeks ago, there was a huge 4-page spread of a refugee camp there. But adding insult to injury, some of the other refugee camps have been flooded. So can we get that back up, the picture of where we are? So we're also in Somaliland. In that case, it's a natural disaster of drought. We were just wrapping up in Mozambique back in February. There was a huge cyclone, forgot the name of it, but it wiped out the community there. And one of the things that Shelterbox is able to do that some of the other organizations don't, because we're smaller and our box is smaller, so it's more nimble, we're able to get to some of the communities that you can't get equipment to.
Okay.
So in Mozambique, that was a particular problem. Also in Madagascar, where smaller rural villages that really didn't have any road to them, we were able to get there. And then the big ones are in Iraq and Syria. We have some particular connections with northern Iraq, so we're able to get supplies into there. And then Syria is just an ongoing disaster that all our organizations are doing everything they can, and they don't have enough resources. But so that's where we currently are. I say 2 weeks, we're probably going to be in another country.
Sure. Now, I noticed that map, you didn't see a lot of highlighted parts in the United States. What about the U.S.?
Okay, we do go to the U.S. occasionally. The very first time was Katrina, and we sent 1,200 boxes in, and you talk to the staff people at Shelterbox, and they say that was the worst deployment they ever had because of our customs officials. But eventually we did get them through. They were deployed, and they got used in a number of different ways in Katrina. They were amongst the other things, a lot of people used them for homes, but also the emergency situations, all those organizations had lost their headquarters. So there's one picture that available where the police department is using it for headquarters. So it got used in a number of ways. And then a few years later, I think we went to, what was next? Tornadoes in 2011 in Arkansas.
Okay.
And there, a number of Rotary clubs called up and asked if we could assist. And the problem with assisting in the United States is that if you're given a choice between being in one of our tents or having your insurance company put you up at the local Marriott,
Right.
or your neighbor or your friends or your relatives' home
Right.
in the city that didn't get afflicted, so there's not
Chances are.
yeah,
Right.
I'm going to go to the Marriott. The maid comes in, makes the bed. So I'm going to Marriott. But we did find a few cases where they needed some things. In the case of Hurricane Sandy, they didn't need tents. I mean, we're in a big city where they were hurt, but they did run out of warm weather clothing. So we provided a lot of hats, boots, or hats and mittens, gloves, that kind of thing, some blankets, so that type. So we tailored it to that.
Sure.
And then, so Sandy, what was the name? Oh, and one of the interesting stories was tornadoes in Oklahoma. Again, no real need for the tent,
Right.
cooking supplies, except that we went out into some of the rural areas and found some farmers that had lost all their buildings, had a big, long commute through areas where the roads were not good situations.
Sure.
So it was a long commute, but the farm still has to be run. Animals still have to be fed,
Right,
crops
right.
still got to be taken care of. So we provided a few tents and allowed the farmer to actually stay on his property and take care of things and watch things over. So generally in a developed country like the United States or Europe, there have been some major floods in Europe. There's just other resources available that can do the job better than what we can.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I guess last but not least, if someone's interested or wants more information or wants to get involved, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, getting involved, the number one thing is to tell the story. If you could help us get the word out, because when there is a disaster, we need the money, and so funding is the big thing. That the box has got to be filled with equipment costs money, and then it has to be shipped. The very beginning of the program, we actually did things like rent a 747.
Oh, wow.
Put 1,000 boxes in it and ship it. Today, because of people funding us ahead of time in anticipation of disasters, we're able to deploy the boxes into different areas. So there was a recent cyclone in Fiji. We actually had boxes 200 miles away. So instead of renting a 747, we actually commandeered a couple boats from some people and put them on their yachts and shipped them up, and they still got there in 12 hours. We had almost no cost into getting the boxes.
That helps.
Dubai is a big transit point and a major transportation hub, so we have a lot of boxes in there. We also have them on a ship in the Caribbean. Well, there's a Dutch ship that floats around the Caribbean, and Caribbean is one of those places where you know there's going to be a hurricane. It's just when and which island's going to get nailed. So that gets worked out. And then a couple other spots down South America and in Australia. So by funding both all the time, so once a year, and then when a big disaster occurs, if you can get your organization together. So I said earlier, it's $1,000 a box, but you can also finance parts of a box, the toolkit, the stove, different aspects of the tent.
Okay.
And we don't always send just the box. In the Philippines, several times the cyclones that have come barreling through there have just ripped the roof off. The rest of the house is still standing, but the roof is gone. So we've developed some kits that are just designed to get the tarp over the top.
Oh, okay.
And so now we got the weather from coming down into the house, then they can begin to work on a more permanent roof. So funding is the number one thing. Telling the story, getting it out so people know, instead of just saying, boy, I'd like to help.
Right.
I'd like to help, I'm going to go to ShelterBox. So telling the story. And then a third one is you could become what's known as an ambassador for the program. So my wife and I go around to different groups and tell the story, bring the equipment, show it off. We've been trained. I've actually gone down to Texas and done a mock disaster.
Oh, wow.
And it was kind of fun, and unfortunately we did it in the spring, not in the summer in Texas. That was, yeah. So being an ambassador will be another one. And then finally, if you have the intent and would really like to get involved, you can become an SRT, a ShelterBox Response Team member.
Oh, wow.
These are the two guys that actually go to the disaster, assess the situation, figure out how we're going to get the boxes there. And while their expenses are paid, they are not paid. So it's strictly a volunteer kind of thing.
Sure.
And you better arrange with your boss, because the way it works is the disaster hits, you get a phone call that says in 24 hours you need to secure an airplane ticket and a visa to get into the country and be on that plane.
Wow.
So your boss better be willing to
Understanding
say,
of,
yeah. And usually what they do is say, boss, I want to reserve these 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks in June. And so if a disaster occurs, then we call those people that said, I can go the last 2 weeks in June.
Gotcha.
And one of the things I kind of forgot earlier, who gets the box? So we've delivered this thing, who gets it? And there's a real pecking order that we've developed, and it goes by need. So a disabled person, the elderly, moms with kids, pregnant moms, those tend to be the first people that get the box.
Okay.
And once they have the box, it is their box. So we don't want it back.
Okay.
If hopefully things will get better and they don't need that,
Right.
if they can make a little bit of money off from it, they probably need the money, so more power to them. So those are the 4 ways you can get involved: fund the project, tell the story, become an ambassador and really present it to different organizations,
Sure.
and then become an SRT, ShelterBox Response Team member. So.
Is there a website or phone number?
Of course there's a website, and I think we got a ShelterBoxUSA.org. If you just go to ShelterBox, as we said earlier, the guy who originated this was from Cornwall, England, so if you go to ShelterBox.org, you'll wind up in England, but the USA one will get you to our organization here in the United States. We're all affiliated, we all do the same thing. For tax purposes, however, we needed a separate organization. And then the other way is contact your local Rotarian. We really support this program. We've been doing it for years. We try and fund 2 boxes every year. If it's a particularly big disaster and we want to do more, then we'll get a 3rd or 4th box. But we try and do 2 boxes every year in and out.
Well, fair enough. I think we're just about out of time, so we'll have to wrap up. But Jeff, thanks again for coming in and talking about what's going on in Rotary and the different kind of programs you guys are involved with. And well, that's all the time we have for Service for the Community. We'll see you next time.